Armored Core began nearly 30 years ago, making it From Software's longest ongoing series of games. Armored Core has seen a lot of changes over the years, growing a lot as time has gone on, evolving and expanding into new horizons. This is especially visible in the 4th and 5th generations, as the story and cores themselves saw large changes. Now, after a 10-year hiatus, we have the 6th generation of Armored Core. Armored Core 6 releasing in August of 2023 to the surprise and enjoyment of many old and new fans alike. So with so many new eyes in the series, I believe it's a great time to jump in and talk about this new generation of Armored Core. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon marks the new beginning for Armored Core as a series, changing quite a bit from its predecessors. What these changes have done is set forth a new path for Armored Core to take, one that I hope keeps going well into the future. So let's talk about Armored Core 6 and the future of Armored Core itself. Armored Core 6 tells us a lot about the future of the series, primarily with how these games will play. Armored Core's 4th generation of games focuses on speed, builds that allow you to go the speed of sound in mere seconds. Armored Core 4, and especially For Answer, are infamous for how fast they are. Armored Core 5 and Verdict Day were somewhat the opposite, focusing on a slower pace of play, having a style more focused on urban warfare. Armored Core 6 takes both of these styles and brings them to a balance. Heavy builds can still compete in faster-paced fights, and lightweight builds have a shot against slower builds with access to better weaponry. It seems like this will remain somewhat the same in future Armored Core titles, a balanced pace of play that rewards adaptability in a changing environment. I like that this seems to be the path Armored Core is going in, one that allows for more creative ways to play and build. Encouraging players to experiment is something I believe is key to keeping Armored Core accessible to anyone interested in taking on its challenges. Without it, you get these same builds that are suited for one thing or another, being incompatible with some challenges to the point where you don't want to use them at all. One change to builds that was somewhat unfortunate was the removal of stabilizers, tinier parts that help stabilize your AC and allow it to achieve a higher performance range in combat. These parts were what really made builds in the 4th generation achieve the notoriety they had. Those weren't removed in Armored Core 6, but I think it would be nice to see them come back, giving builds more variety while still retaining a primary focus. Build variety is an aspect of Armored Core that has always been intact. Not every part will go together, but figuring out how to build an AC capable of taking on your challenges is an integral part of what makes these games what they are. It's also part of the series' namesake. Armored Core as a concept was created by the series mech designer Shoji Kawamori. He wanted the game's mechs to have this unique visual identity. His idea were the armored cores, core blocks containing the vitals and the frame of the mech, modularity and change being the key focus for the designs. As far as I can tell, the future of Armored Core build-wise will look somewhat the same as it does now. I don't see any huge changes coming with the continuation of the 6th gen, though generations beyond this may prove to once again shake up how cores work. Moving forward, there was one huge addition to the missions here in Armored Core 6 that really shakes up both builds and combat, that addition being the game's bosses. The decision to have bosses as a centered focus for missions is one that looks like it'll stay. Grand scale fights have had their place in Armored Core, but not quite like this. With the changes to healing and impact, it wouldn't make much sense to suddenly drop the bosses presented by Armored Core 6. If anything, these bosses will appear in higher variety with new mechanics and designs. Armored Core has had large-scale bosses before, though what makes the 6th generation of these fights unique is how they function. Non-AC bosses before were more or less war machines, large-scale mechs with the purpose of turning the tide of battle using strength. Armored Core 6's bosses are more cunning. They seem to be made for a wide variety of purposes, though one of those purposes specifically is to counter ACs. These bosses were built with AC combat in mind, meant to stop even skilled pilots from proceeding onwards, being built to compete with and overwhelm cores built on the standard market. With how strong cores have been throughout the series, it makes sense that humanity would want to counter them in some way. I like to use Balteus, the boss at the end of Chapter 1, as a means of explaining this. The way Balteus moves and fights is similar to an AC, using dashes for evasion, armor implants for defense, and a wide variety of weapons to counter even the most thought-out builds. It's clear that Balteus was built to fight other cores. Balteus isn't the only boss built this way. There are many others that were built to counter both ACs and other boss-type machines as well. These come in the form of C-weapons, machines powered by coral generators meant to fulfill various different purposes. These provide some of the highest difficulty fights that Armored Core 6 has to offer. If Armored Core 6 receives a sequel like the other generations did, then I would expect to see more of these fights. Perhaps in the next title, these bosses will take on new shapes, becoming the primary combat encounters instead of fights against other cores. I can't say this is something I would want, but it's definitely something I'd be interested to see. With everything that has been presented to us in lore, the inclusion of these massive mechanical beasts is very welcome, presenting a new frontier for the mechanical design of the series, a new challenge for both the developers and players alike. One thing I would personally like to see in this department would be the return of old tech. Technology from the earlier games that served as simple background or lore pieces. Machines built long ago that humanity no longer understands. Something like the sea weapons, but without the coral being involved. Think Armored Core Nexus, but on a different level. As cool as this would be though, I do want to see a return to primarily core versus core combat. It is clear that From Software is headed in a direction that combines their previous game experience with new projects, incorporating different mechanics and adapting them for new games. The inclusion of posture to Armored Core 6 is one of these, taking it from Sekiro and reworking it to fit in with Armored Core. If you're wondering why this feature is in Armored Core 6, then you'll be surprised to know that there is a reasonable answer. The director of Armored Core 6, Masaru Yamamura, was previously a lead designer for Sekiro. He likely wanted to incorporate that system in some way to add a new flair to his game, one that he was perhaps familiar with already. If this feature is one that will stick around, then I would like to see a rework for it. Currently, as it stands, it has no place in core versus core fights. It encourages one style of play that defeats the purpose of making creative builds. It gives Armored Core 6 an easy mode that hands a low skill win to players. In the worst cases, those players start to rely on it, not branching out into different playstyles and falling into a one-trick style of play. My recommendation would be to keep the mechanic but reduce its effectiveness immensely. Make posture build-up take longer, even with things like explosives and high-impact physical weapons. Then with stagger, reduce the total damage you can do with a weakness opening. Melting more than half a boss's HP thanks to one opening is the biggest reason these builds are so powerful. So to put it in basic terms, all it needs is a small set of percentage nerfs across the board. Nothing too crushing, just enough for it to be viable, but not so powerful that it single-handedly rules the damage meta. Other mechanics like precise OS tuning, armor extensions, and repair kits all look like they're in the same boat, being on track to continue seeing variants in future titles. OS tuning is already something we've seen before in the form of part tuning. I would love to see another tuning system like we had in Armored Core 4, one where we can tune the individual parts in our builds to stand out more in their respective niches, more precise adjustments to the way our parts work, allowing builds to become even more unique to us, our playstyles being reflected by these adjustments. Having this back could also shake up any core fight, making even recognizable parts feel unpredictable. Imagine heavier arms that are tuned for tracking performance, giving them an edge where they otherwise wouldn't have one. Another thing I think would be interesting to have back would be debt. As a base mechanic, I'm not really a fan of debt. In earlier titles, it could be brutal and sometimes even detrimental to the learning process. That mostly just came with the expense of repairs and ammo though, being shoved further down at the start while later on being able to eat the cost of losing more comfortably. With the changes to credit distribution at the end of missions, it could end up being a fun system to work around, using debt as a means of learning combat and playing better overall. It would give this threat to poor performance, forcing you to pay attention to your surroundings better. Even though I'm not a fan of this kind of thing, I can still recognize its potential. If it is to come back, then having it be in the later games would make the most sense. Many players will be familiar with the series by then, or at least more familiar. They will know the basics and how to work around a challenge. That way, debt would be less crushing as fewer people would be stuck in the learning stage. Though there is a reason this system was removed, so I don't know if it will ever be added back, or if it will stick around if it does. The one thing I'm certain will stick around is the coral. This super fuel that has caused wars to be fought over it doesn't seem like it will ever leave, especially considering it is at the center of Armored Core 6's story. Where it's at now and where it will go in the future story-wise is incredibly interesting. A new perspective on the coral post-Armored Core 6 would be exciting to see going forward. Story-wise, it looks like humanity's conquest of the stars is something we will see a whole lot more of. Rubicon 3 is just one of the planets in the solar system Armored Core 6 takes place in. If Rubicon is laid to rest in Armored Core 6 or its possible sequel, then other planets could be open for consideration. Other places that coral was found or where humanity waged corporate wars. Personally, I would be interested to see what life is like now on Earth. After all of the warfare, all of the fighting, after all of the years spent there, what does it look like now? The coral 100% made it there, considering just how important it is to the corporations. So what effects did it have on our home planet? All in all, it should be very enthralling to experience regardless of locale. When putting this all together, it seems like the future of Armored Core is one not too different from what we've already seen. Light changes here and there that make each generation stand out. The new changes could stick around, but as fewer players enter in as newcomers, it makes sense that more drastic changes would be made, adding features back in that make the games more difficult. I know this isn't the most exciting outlook on the future of Armored Core, but we really can't say for certain what will be or what won't be changed going forward. Armored Core has always been about change, about adapting to a growing challenge. It makes sense that the games themselves would participate in this trend of growth as well. For now, we can keep guessing. We can theorize and hypothesize about everything that will happen next in Armored Core, though we won't know for certain what is to come of the series until we see it for ourselves. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. The best thing we can do is continue to show our support for the series. The only way we'll see these things happen is if we show our demand for them. I'm happy to see so many newcomers to the series, and I've been ecstatic to branch back out into it myself, going back to play the games I remember enjoying and trying out the ones I never played. These games are truly remarkable, at least in their own right, so let's share our voices, to let FromSoft know that we want more Armored Core. Armored Core's return has been a long time coming. It's been great to know that more people than ever are trying it out. It's even better to hear that FromSoft themselves want to make more. Nothing has been confirmed so far, but some passing comments from FromSoft representatives have alluded to future titles coming for the series. I really want it to keep going too. Armored Core never really got the opportunity it needed to shine in the international market. It's such an amazing series regardless of generation. The things it was able to pull off back in the day were impressive. I can't really say for sure if Armored Core will continue on for much longer. Miyazaki has said that multiple titles are in development, at least in the concept stage. Miyazaki will continue directing at FromSoft, but other directors will be making games as well. Because of this, there is a good chance that Yamamura will direct another Armored Core, though he may also turn his eyes to another game style like Sekiro. Hopefully, whatever we get in terms of future Armored Core installments will be fun. That was the original idea I had in mind when I was making this video. Armored Core 6 is such a fun-focused game, and that is one of its greatest strengths. It's not only accessible to new players, but it's also fun to play as a whole. The way you move and fight, the creativity with builds, emblems, painting, decals, everything that makes your build yours. Anything and everything about Armored Core 6, it's just pure fun, and that's my favorite part about it. Whatever is in store for Armored Core's future, I'll be there to see it. I missed out on a few generations of Armored Core, but I refuse to miss out on the next ones. With all the new eyes on the series, I'm happy to see it have the chance it deserves to fly. To fly on a raven's wings.